must ask you, first of all, I mean, you now work in sort of big, PR, long-term sort of strategic advice for companies and individuals, having been a political editor of a national newspaper for many, many years. What would your advice be to Prince Andrew right now as he's being urged to stay out of sight over this Chinese spy scandal, this guy H6? We're only allowed to call him H6 because of a British court order. But what would your advice to Prince Andrew be?
It's a very, very difficult situation that Prince Andrew finds himself in, obviously, and we all can see that, and we all know that, and a period of quiet and keeping out of the cameras is obviously the way to go for him.
Not an Emily Maitlis interview?
I think that we all know that Emily Maitlis's interview was obviously a tempting moment for the Prince, and he decided wrongly, in my view, to take that offer. I mean, here's a situation that he can't win in, and he needs to probably just keep out of the limelight for a very long time. And I think, for the royal family, who are always in the spotlight, particularly at Christmas, it's very important that the focus is on family and all the messages that they want to send to the country. We know that the King and the Princess have both been going through really difficult health scares this year, and we wish them all the best. But the Prince Andrew issue is not going to go away easily. It's a very important issue, the H6 issue, which I prefer us to focus on. That's the bigger issue, not whether Prince Andrew was somebody who was duped. I mean, Prince Andrew would have taken the advice of the Foreign Office, I'm sure of that. And the Foreign Office has subsequently said, this guy is somebody we need to be worried about, and the government has taken the right steps. It's a much deeper and bigger issue.
Indeed. We were talking to former Security Minister Tom Tugendhat. He says, this is tip of the iceberg. The only reason we know about this really is because it involved Prince Andrew, but obviously still trying to sort of find out more details about who this man was. But clearly, fingers in many different pies at the heart of the British establishment. Let's talk about the British establishment, though, because we know the British establishment was massively opposed to Brexit. We know Sir Keir Starmer, when he was Shadow Brexit Secretary, was massively opposed to Brexit, tried to stop it from happening for 3 years in that role before Boris Johnson got elected in 2019. We understand that Keir Starmer has now set up a unit of more than 100 civil servants, more, our former Brexit chief negotiator Lord Frost points out, than he had to negotiate Brexit. He calls it a surrender squad, but their aim is apparently to basically rejig our relationship with Brussels, to have closer EU ties going forward. Do you think Keir Starmer is going to try and basically take us back into the EU by hook or by crook through the back door?
It's clear that this government believes that Britain needs a closer relationship with the European Union. There are others who take the view that what Britain needs to do is to properly do Brexit. And that means not to try and find softer relationships. It means to have a relationship with the regulatory regime, with the legislative regime, which allows Britain to stand on its own 2 feet and compete on the world stage without necessarily having to do deals behind the scenes. And those are the two very specific positions. What we have right now is we're kind of stuck in the middle. We haven't got one or the other. And I do think that Keir Starmer's hope and aim, with lots and lots of his cabinet colleagues, is to create a new relationship with the European Union, not in and not out, but a much more closer working relationship. And of course, the danger of that, Julia, is that those people in the European Union only want to see Britain punished for leaving in the first place, and they will try and find a way of finding us in some way, or forcing us to do rules which suit them, not us. And that's the danger here. It's very, very difficult to renegotiate a way back into a club that you've left, particularly one which is so political.
Well, indeed. I mean, I still don't think that Britain would vote to go back in any way. The terms in which the EU would offer us back in, we'd lose that to Margaret Thatcher's rebate, and I think we'd be paying a lot more money. I don't think there was any debate, and we looked at the world economies, we'd be saying, well, why on earth do we want to harness ourselves to these failing economies in Europe, rather than looking, to the Trans-Pacific, those countries, obviously to America and elsewhere. I think it's going to become even more obvious as the years go by, particularly under a Trump presidency, and what he's going to plan to do. Boris Johnson has written in the Mail today, he's accusing Keir Starmer of telling, he says, barefaced lies after assembling this so-called surrender squad. And basically that, he always planned to take us back in to the EU, even though, of course, after 2019, when he became Labour leader, he said he accepted that we had left and we wouldn't try to take us back in. Do you think that's a fair analysis from the former Prime Minister? Barefaced lies from Starmer?
Yeah, that the opponents to Keir Starmer are trying to get up a narrative about the Prime Minister, which is somebody who you can't trust, you can't take his word. So whether you look at this particular issue of the European Union, whether you look at the tax situation, the Prime Minister made promises before the election and they changed in the budget. So the narrative that Boris is trying to get going is you can't believe a word Keir Starmer says. So whether or not there's massive truth to this or a little bit of truth, it's really about political game playing, trying to position your opponent in a particular way. Why? Because most of our viewers and listeners are too busy. Yeah. Most of us are getting on with our lives. We can't really focus on every single day and every single move that happens in politics. Where we act is when we get big ideas about a person, whether are good, bad, and that's what Boris is trying to do right now. So whether or not it sticks, time will tell. But of course, that's the challenge for Keir Starmer, is he has to bear in mind that 51% of this nation voted to leave the European Union. So he needs to bear that in mind. He needs to bear in mind that Nigel Farage is very much back on the political scene, could well be given a lot of money by Elon Musk to really fight the next election. All of this has an implication for the Conservative Party as well. So lots happening here.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, Prime Minister out of the country again today. He's in Norway. I mean, he's gone from being, was it two-tier Keir, three-gear Keir, now never hear Keir. I mean, because people don't see him. But there's no doubt at all all of this having an impact on his poll ratings. I mean, he's basically, according to a damning new poll, the worst Prime Minister in modern history, according to the people. Basically, a whopping 6 in 10 people say they're dissatisfied with the PM's track record, including more than a third of, 4 out of 10 Labour supporters. Just 1 in 4 voters across all political voters said they were satisfied with his performance since Labour won power in July. And barely half, just 54% of Labour's own voters said they were satisfied. Now, a lot of this will be, with a fuel allowance being scrapped, the farmers' tax, the free gear stuff. It was all very tacky. A lot of people very unhappy. He's not pleasing his own voters, at the same time certainly not pleasing those who didn't vote for him. I think Liz Truss would probably have come up worse if she had lasted 5 months, which she only lasted 49 days, of course. But what can Keir Starmer do to improve his ratings, other than, I don't know, do a better job?
Time is the great challenge here. The Prime Minister knew absolutely that he was going to come in and he was going to shake things up, and shaking things up is always going to annoy people. And don't forget, one of the reasons the polls are saying what they're saying is because all day long, every day, the headlines are saying the same sorts of things. So unsurprisingly, people get that impression. If I was advising him, I wouldn't be particularly worried about that right now. What matters is delivery and showing competence over the long course. And that's what he really needs to focus on. I mean, a word on going abroad. I'm massively relaxed about him going abroad. I know that that's a sort of constant theme, but the fact is he's a new Prime Minister. He doesn't know relationships on the world stage, and he needs Britain needs a Prime Minister who is well connected on the world stage, whether we like it or not. And the only way of doing that is getting into the room with people and forging personal relationships, which behind the scenes things happen that our listeners and viewers don't see, don't know about, don't really wouldn't care about until it mattered. And that's the job of the Prime Minister, is to build relationships so he has alliances, and that Britain is taken seriously where it matters. And that's what he's doing right now. It doesn't matter really that he's not here in London. What matters is he's representing the country.
Yeah. I understand that, but I think that also a lot of people go, well, but we've got a lot of things we need to have dealt with here. It's a perception, isn't it? You know as well as I do, politics is a lot about what people perceive rather than what is actually happening.
Perception is 9/10 of the law. There's no question about it. And in this day of multimedia, you can actually create the perception of being in lots of places at the same time with different footage and all the rest of it. And they try and do that. They do a decent job of that. But I will say this, we would be the first people to criticise him for not being on the world stage and creating relationships with countries that really matter. And as I say, it's not, he can't lead by day-to-day headlines. He needs to do the right thing as the Prime Minister, take some pain where there's pain necessary, because change is happening. When you do change, people don't like it. And I totally understand that, and that's difficult. That's why he needs to be constantly surrounded by good people, good advisors, a cabinet that's doing a good job and focused on their job.
Good luck with that. George Pascoe-Watson, former political editor of The Sun, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Sam Armstrong's still with me in the studio. Thing is, I don't think Keir Starmer is surrounded by a lot of good advisors or good cabinet ministers. He's not perceived to be doing a good job, I think, back in the UK. And it's all very well, isn't it, not chasing headlines, not worrying about what the 24-hour news schedule is about, but actually that does impact. And there is just this general feeling that Labour have completely lost control just within months of taking office. And we've got another 4.5 years of this.
Yeah, I think the era of the kind of thick-of-it style, shouty, sweary advisors, very strong figures, within, of course, based on real people within the Labour Party, is now long behind us. Yeah. I mean, Keir Starmer, we saw who he brought in as his chief of staff, Sue Gray, who ended up giving more interviews than he did, causing a huge rupture, debacle, terrible start to an administration. And it is clear that this is a man that has got relatively poor judgment about the character of people. Yeah. He has brought a convicted fraudster into his cabinet. You know, he has brought a civil servant into his team that shouldn't have been taking that kind of job. And we've seen time and time again a man that just surrounds himself with actually quite weak people. And the part of it is, in my mind, you do wonder if, you know, Keir Starmer's a bit more comfortable when he keeps some of his potential threats within the Labour Party.
Yeah, I think I always find fascinating when he is questioned how, by journalists who do get to ask him questions, how irritated and tetchy he gets. He clearly doesn't like to be questioned. You know, well, sorry, Prime Minister, you're a democratic elected politician. People are going to ask you questions you don't like. Get over it. If you don't like it, maybe, you know, I don't know, move to China. Xi Jinping doesn't have to answer difficult questions. I'd love to hear from you what you make of, you know, Keir Starmer. He's on the telly right now, meeting with the Prime Minister of Norway. Never hear Keir. Love to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000.